Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. This budget should have been a defining moment, a chance to turn record revenues into meaningful outcomes for families, communities, small businesses and the most disadvantaged West Australians across our state. Instead, alas, it is a mean budget from a miserable government and a missed opportunity for the people. Let me first acknowledge the strength of Western Australia's economy. Unemployment is low, exports are booming and the resources sector continues to deliver record returns fuelled by global demand. It is a time of economic good fortune, not built on the back of government-led fiscal reform or restraint or economic value creation, but built largely on external factors. Deputy Speaker, prosperity on paper is not enough. Behind the surpluses lies a growing disconnect, a widening gap between the government's narrative of success and the daily reality for many West Australians. Families are struggling with cost of living and soaring rents. Small businesses are burdened by over-regulation and escalating costs. Young people are giving up on the dream of ever owning a home. Hospitals and schools are stretched, teachers and nurses are burnt out, and more than 34,000 West Australians are waiting for a place to live. Deputy Speaker, the Premier told West Australians during the election campaign that cost of living was his top priority. He said it multiple times, over and over and over again. Yet the first budget after the election demonstrates exactly the opposite. This is a budget with the wrong priorities. The sweeteners promised before the election have been ripped away. Back swim free entry, gone. Kids sport funding, slashed. And much needed funding for women's health centres, non-existent. In fact, forgotten. These were cynical measures to buy votes, and this mean government quietly took them away, thinking no one would notice. The impact on the most vulnerable, the very people we continually hear Labor champions, is devastating. The kid who now can't play soccer, or the single mum who now can't enrol her children in back swim. But according to the member for Fremantle members, those kids can just go to the beach to learn how to swim. Tell that to the people with kids in Kalgoorlie or Newman or Tom Price. Deputy Speaker, they can find the money for a racetrack in Burswood that nobody wants, but they won't share the benefits of prosperity with the people. How does that work? How can that be? I know many sitting on the benches opposite will be feeling let down by the Treasurer and the Premier on the decisions made in this budget. We know what they took to their electorates at the most recent election. We know what they had to say. We know what was in the budget last week. Decisions that don't support the most disadvantaged in their electorates. Decisions that don't reflect their own values and those that the Labor Party are so quick to remind us that they champion. Nothing in this budget reflects that, Deputy Speaker. Despite receiving over $117 billion in GST and royalties since 2017, double what the previous government received, Labor has failed to turn that windfall into providing for people, including those people in the most need. And they failed to turn this good fortune into long-term benefit for the state of Western Australia. Western Australians want more than glossy brochures and photo ops. They want a budget that addresses issues and lays the groundwork for future growth based in reality and centred on our comparative advantages. Instead, they got another budget dominated by a single obsession, Metronet. Members now costing $15.5 billion. That's a running total, not the final total. That's the running total, $15.5 billion, with a $12 billion blowout, while frontline services are left behind. And this is not just poor prioritisation, it is actively undermining the state's capacity to meet other pressing needs. Deputy Speaker, Western Australians are not asking for the world. They're asking for leadership, for affordable housing, for timely health care, for safe communities, for great public schools and real sustainable cost of living relief. This budget could have delivered that, It could have shared the benefits of prosperity more fairly. Instead, it has confirmed what many already suspect, that this is a government more focused on pet projects than supporting people of Western Australia and building a better future for them. Deputy Speaker, the state is awash with revenue, driven by record iron ore royalties and surging GST receipts. But despite these windfalls, the Cook Labor government continues to spend beyond its mean, pushing Western Australia deeper and deeper into debt. It simply defies belief. We've seen the largest surpluses ever recorded in our state's history. $24 billion over 7 years, and another $13 billion expected over the forward estimates. And yet net debt is forecast to rise to $42.5 billion within just 4 years. Members, do we remember the debt monster? Yes. Are there others in this chamber who remember the debt monster? It will not be long before the debt monster will be making a very public reappearance. This from a government that came to power promising fiscal restraint, claiming they would manage the state's finances like a household mortgage. Remember that? Yes. Remember that? I remember the former Premier saying exactly that. Instead, they've chosen a path of unchecked expenditure, missing a once-in-a-generation opportunity to secure our long-term financial future. What's even more concerning is that while the headline budget shows an operating surplus, the government is quietly running cash deficits. That means they are spending more than they receive in real terms and are covering the difference by borrowing. They are literally going further into debt to deliver pet projects, including, members, a $220 million racetrack at Burswood that nobody wants. I'll look around the chamber again and let's see which member will raise his head and say, yes, I support it. Which member will raise their gaze towards me and say, yes, I want it. Members, have any eyes lifted? Have any eyes lifted?
Even the Minister over there shaking it.
Okay, well, we know the member for Vic Park. Despite the great claim that those opposite have a mandate to deliver these projects, we know that the member for Vic Park did not have this $217 million project for Victoria Park in her very area on any of her election paraphernalia. And I wonder why. Because when I reflect on the member for Vic Park's inaugural speech on the 4th of May 2021, I note that she said, "The Victoria Park community made me who I am, and I am so proud to have the opportunity to repay the investment they have made in me. I love Vic Park and its people," she said. She went on to thank Ben Wyatt, the outgoing member for Vic Park, and then said, "Another friend of mine, former Premier and member for Victoria Park, the Honourable Jeff Gallop, rang me the day after the election to reiterate the expectations of our community. They expect their member to make a difference, and I intend to do just that." I wonder if the difference the people of Vic Park were hoping that their member would make was a $217 million racetrack in the middle of Burswood Park that nobody wants.
I don't think so.
Perhaps that's a matter for her to decide. So a $220 million racetrack at Burswood, $65 million for Rogers rugby team, and almost $11 billion in transport projects over the next 4 years. That is twice the funding provided for much needed health and education infrastructure. This is not sound economic management. It is short-sighted and unsustainable, and the Premier and Treasurer repeatedly claim to be responsible economic managers, yet their record tells a different story. Surpluses have been squandered, structural reform ignored, and long-term debt is still rising. This isn't just a fiscal failure, it's a breach of trust. Deputy Speaker, it's astonishing that even as the state posts a $2.4 billion surplus, thousands of West Australian households are still asking, what support is there for us in this budget? Yes, The budget does include some cost of living relief, including capping public transport fares, halving Trans WA fares, and delivering a second round of the WA student assistance payment. But if you don't regularly use public transport or have kids at school, these measures do nothing to assist with the pressure of paying for groceries, electricity, water, gas, rent, mortgages, or running your car. All of those up. And for the thousands of West Australians doing it tough, including some of the most vulnerable in our state, there's precious little in this budget. Electricity and water charges are going up. The daily electricity supply charges increased by 138%. And, as we've mentioned, for the first time ever, for a West Australian, getting your car on the road will now cost you more than $1,000 per year. That's for each car in every household. The emergency services levy is increasing by 5%. And, Deputy Speaker, as Anglicare WA have stated, there's a portion of our community who've really been forgotten here, and the ability to target initiatives to be able to support those who are experiencing financial hardship, mental health issues, family and domestic violence, housing instability have really been missed. Unfortunately, this isn't just a policy critique, it's the lived reality for many West Australians. Families skipping meals, rationing medication and going without heating. Deputy Speaker, the message from the front line is clear. More needs to be done. However, more wasn't done. Despite the Treasurer's claim of a $50 reduction in household charges, families will need to find another $400 to cover their bills compared to last year. The claim of $50 reduction, the reality, $400 extra required in households to cover their bills compared to last year. Over 9 years, this government has added $1,200 to household fees and charges. Meanwhile, community services are stretched to breaking point. Food banks, emergency housing providers and financial counsellors are swamped, many dealing with clients who have never asked for help before. And it's not just households under strain. Small and medium-sized businesses, the backbone of our economy, are also being squeezed. Higher utility bills, licence fees and service charges are eroding their already thin margins. It is getting harder and harder for those businesses to stay open and to keep people employed. The highest payroll tax burden in Australia, is also acting as a huge disincentive to employ more West Australians and for businesses to grow. These are the businesses that train apprentices, Deputy Speaker. They create jobs, they support local communities, yet this government continues to treat them as little more than a cash cow. At a time when the state can afford to ease the pressure, it has instead chosen to tighten the screws. Deputy Speaker, I heard the Premier say that the strength of our economy should be matched by the strength of our support for those doing it tough. And I agree with him, Deputy Speaker, and those members behind me agreed with the Premier. But sadly, this budget fails that test. Deputy Speaker, it is deeply troubling that at a time of unprecedented economic prosperity, essential services are deteriorating. And let's start, shall we, with our failing health system. Under successive Labor governments and successive Labor health ministers, that revolving door, Western Australia's health system has deteriorated, despite the tireless efforts of frontline workers. Hospitals do not have the capacity to deliver the quality care that patients deserve. Elective surgery waitlists have blown out by 50%, from 19,000 in 2017 to over 30,000 today. And remember this, those numbers can be misleading. They can act as some measure to take your mind away from the real story. But remember this, members, behind every number is a person living in pain, with limited mobility, or a child missing vital opportunities to learn and to grow. Ambulance ramping, Deputy Speaker, has increased by 600% to an average of 4,980 hours. Now, we've all heard this before, but it's worth reminding ourselves one more time. The Premier once called 1,030 hours a crisis. That was his word. 1,030 hours of ambulance ramping was a crisis. What do we call it now? A catastrophe? Armageddon? Something that they are just not capable of fixing? Ever? Which is it? Astoundingly, WA now has the lowest number of public hospital beds per capita in the country. How is that possible? Only 48% of emergency patients are seen on time. That is the worst result in the nation. The worst result. And these aren't just poor statistics, they are dangerous. In child health, the situation is just as grim. Over 10,000 children in Perth are waiting to see a paediatrician, with median wait times blowing out to nearly 2 years during the most critical stages of development. In some areas, such as Armidale, this extends to almost 4 years. No more excuses. This is Labor's failure, and they should be embarrassed and ashamed. Deputy Speaker, the gap between this Labor government's spin on crime and the lived reality for Western Australians is also staggering. While ministers cite broad statistics to claim crime is under control, the facts tell a very, very different story. Under Labor's watch, violent assaults are up 42%, and family and domestic violence offences have risen 76%. WA now has the highest rate of reported FDV assaults against women in this country. It's 1,254 per 100,000 females, making it the most dangerous state in Australia to be a woman. This crisis is not confined to Perth. Violent crime is up 62% in Kalgoorlie, 112% in Laverton, and 84% in Geraldton. Deputy Speaker, an extension, please.
Extension granted.
Thank you. Regional communities are pleading for help, but they are being ignored. Police officers are under pressure, under-resourced and increasingly unsupported. And every district is understaffed. Mental health cases amongst officers have surged from 777 in 2019 to 3,327 in 2022. The job is harder. The toll is heavier. Yet the government's response has been completely inadequate. Failures like the under-resourced GPS tracking rollout for FDV offenders have only added to frontline burdens.
Regional WA.
And in one of the wealthiest states in the nation, if not the wealthiest state in the nation, it is shameful that so many West Australians cannot find an affordable place to live. Despite record surpluses, the housing crisis has worsened under Labor. Rents have soared 76% since 2020. Affordable rentals have virtually disappeared, Deputy Speaker, and the median house price has jumped 91% in 6 years. Building a home takes longer in WA than anywhere else in the country. And still, over 9,000 people are homeless on any given night. Home ownership is now a distant dream for many, replaced by housing stress and insecurity. The crisis didn't come without warning, but Labor has failed to deliver any long-term solutions. Despite countless promises, quoting statistics, very little has happened. How many times, members, have we heard about a laser focus and every lever being pulled?
Lots of levers.
More levers are required. They need to be pulled more often. Social housing wait lists are 32% higher than they were 4 years ago, Deputy Speaker. 32% higher. And emergency welfare services are overwhelmed. Labor sold off over $200 million in public housing during its first term and reinvested less than $150 million. The result is a net gain of just 114 social housing dwellings in 7 years. A net gain of just 114 in 7 long years. Labor had the money and the time, but lacked any urgency whatsoever. The result is a growing crisis with vulnerable West Australians left behind. Housing, Deputy Speaker, is not a luxury. It's a foundation for dignity, stability and opportunity. Labor should be held accountable for failing to deliver. If there's one thing both sides of this place can agree on, it's that every child deserves to learn and every teacher deserves to teach in a world-class education system. But that, sadly, is not the reality in Western Australia today. Our public school system is under immense strain. Since 2019, teacher resignations have more than doubled, many citing workload, burnout and a lack of support. More teachers are reporting verbal and physical abuse, while student suspensions and exclusions have reached record highs. In some of our biggest primary schools, ovals are being flooded with transportables to manage overcrowding. The libraries and staff rooms are being turned into makeshift classrooms to cope with excessive student numbers. We know that teachers are teaching at recess and at lunchtime to be able to accommodate the excessive numbers of students on a small school footprint. And as students' needs become more complex, teachers are reporting little meaningful support and less recognition and respect. All this and the government attempts to siphon nearly $40 million earmarked for schools into consolidated revenue and towards its pet projects. Did the Minister for Education fight the Treasurer on this and lose, or did she just let it go through to the keeper? We keep hearing education is in Labor's DNA, but you can't hide behind flimsy rhetoric. The government needs to do more in education and there is simply no excuse for them not to do so. Deputy Speaker, let me be clear. The opposition supports major infrastructure projects that are well planned, delivered on time and, critically, on budget. What we oppose and what frustrates many West Australians is the endless stream of cost and time blowouts, especially with MetroNet. Incredibly, this message must be getting through to the government, as this is the first budget not to have a MetroNet feature box in the budget papers. Either that, or they're now trying to hide the actual amount they are spending on it from the community. This year's budget allocates yet another $2 billion to MetroNet. That takes the total project to $15.5 billion and the blowout to over $12 billion. Meanwhile, health and education receive just a fraction of that funding. These aren't budgeting accidents. These are deliberate choices. Choices that prioritise rail lines over hospitals bursting at the seams, over schools filled with demountables and over frontline services stretched to their limits. The record asset investment program is also damaging the wider economy. With acute workforce shortages, state-led projects are crowding out the private sector. Builders can't find tradespeople. Housing construction is delayed and regional infrastructure is falling behind. This isn't just a housing supply issue, it's a capacity crisis, Deputy Speaker, made worse by Labor's obsession with politically driven infrastructure at any cost. Good government is about balance, investing in people, not just concrete. Acting Speaker, Western Australians want help with housing, with health and education, not more photo ops at train stations. They have had enough of those. When the new Energy Minister was appointed in March, there was cautious optimism for a more practical approach. Instead, we've seen more big talk and little delivery. Government remains fixated on long-term decarbonisation targets. but it's failing on the fundamentals. Those fundamentals ensuring reliable, affordable energy for Western Australians now and critically into the future. Despite years of announcements, WA still lacks a clear, funded energy transition plan. There's not enough new generation storage or grid investment underway to guarantee supply. The opposition has been warning of the impending shortfalls in generation and distribution for some time. Just yesterday, the Australian Market Energy Operator, AEMO, confirmed exactly this with their latest review of our state's energy supply. AEMO acknowledges that more energy will be required at a time the government is closing down coal-fired generation. Without additional investment, this government's transition plan will fail. It will fail. They will not be able to keep the lights on and ensure energy is affordable. Deputy Speaker, businesses are already paying the price, with contestable electricity customers facing price hikes of 25 to 45%. A direct result of poor planning and underinvestment. Households will endure a further 2.5% increase in electricity this year, and since 2016 they have been inflicted with a 138% increase in the electricity daily supply charge. Labor's energy roadmap is underfunded and running out of time. We need an energy plan based on engineering, not ideology. One that secures firm generation, modernises the grid and keeps the lights on at a price people can afford. Deputy Speaker, finally I turn my attentions to my electorate of Churchlands. The former member of Churchlands boasted 27 commitments worth $10 million for Churchlands during the election campaign. They were presented on a glossy brochure, and that's great because if they are all delivered, the community that I represent will have been well looked after. But I want my constituents to know that these 27 projects that were delivered at a cost or at a forecast cost of around $10 million will need to be delivered as per the commitment in the most recent election. Based on this year's budget, there's good reason to doubt commitments like the $700,000 for pedestrian safety near Churchlands Primary School, $60,000 for the Woodlands Primary School Library and $75,000 for better storage at Lake Munga Community Shed. Now, it might be funded, they might be funded at the very end of this 4-year term, or maybe not at all. But the people of Churchlands will be watching, so will their elected member. Deputy Speaker, can I conclude by saying that after 9 budgets and record revenues, this government had every chance to share the benefits of prosperity, courtesy of record revenues and resource royalties and the GST deal. They had the opportunity to future-proof our economy with a vision for the future, a plan to reduce debt. But instead, we've been handed a budget that is heavy on spin and light on support and solutions. Labor has enjoyed the biggest financial windfall in our state's history, more than double the royalties and GST of the previous Liberal National Government. But rather than invest in the essentials, healthcare, education, housing and safety, they've prioritised pet projects, driven up debt and passed rising costs onto struggling families. And we've seen the result. We have seen the result. A healthcare system under immense strain, a worsening housing crisis, rising violent crime, power prices surging for businesses and no sound energy plan, education outcomes slipping and classrooms overcrowded, and West Australians hit with higher fees and charges despite a multi-billion-dollar surplus. West Australians want cost of living relief, affordable housing, quality schools, accessible healthcare and not, Deputy Speaker, not a racetrack at Burswood. They deserve a government that invests in people, especially those doing it tough, and they deserve a government that invests in the future of this state. Deputy Speaker, they deserve better than the mean-spirited and short-sighted budget the Treasurer has just delivered. Thank you.
Hear, hear.